Hi, my name is Chris, aka The Philosopher's Games. Did you ever notice that some terms that J.R.R. Tolkien invented for his book The Lord of the Rings can be found in, for example, some classic Japanese games? We have the character Balrog, that is the boxer in Street Fighter. Fun fact, in the international versions, the name of 3 characters are switched around compared to the original Japanese version. The mentioned boxer in the Japanese version is called M. Bison, as reference to Mike Tyson. The Spanish dude with a claw, we know as Vega, is called Balrog in Japan, and the big antagonist and dictator M. Bison is called Vega in Japan. Very confusing. However, the Sindarin term Balrog was invented by Tolkien. The name also appears in Dragon Quest III from 1988, at least if you find an old localization of it. This enemy is later known as Soaring Scourger, I assume due to fears of rights violations. Same in the game Kadash from 1989. Another term you find in, for example, the Final Fantasy games is the term Mithril, often written as Mithril with a Y instead of the first I. I think it first appeared in Final Fantasy II from 1988. Also, Dragon Quest III has a Mithril helm. Sega's Shining Force 2 from 1993 also has Mithril as a rare ore in it. In Final Fantasy Adventure from 1991, which is a predecessor of Secret of Mana, you have to bring Mithril to a dwarf who makes armor out of it for you. Sword of Mana from 2003 even has the term Mithril Silver in it. In the original first edition of The Hobbit from 1937, the term Mithril did not exist yet, and the material was described as silvered steel. But also in the anime OVA series Record of LotR's War, you find quite a few parallels. For example, we find the dwarf Gim, originally a miner from the Iron Kingdom. In Lord of the Rings, we have Gimli with relatives from the Iron Hills. The GH sound is rare in Tolkien's dwarvish language Khuz'dul, but it exists in, for example, the name of the dwarven king Azachal. I would say the consonant plus an H combination is quite common in Dwarvish, especially the KH, in names like Khazad-dûm, Khuz'dul or Khaled Zaram. One would assume Tolkien and Lord of the Rings were just very popular in Japan and influenced the people making those games, but that was not the case. Of course, Lord of the Rings had a Japanese translation published from 1972 to 1975. But as far as I'm aware, it never had the same impact as in Europe or the US, especially before the Peter Jackson films came out. For sure, there are fans in Japan, but it seems not as influential as in Europe or the US. Also, the Japanese translation must have been a very difficult task for the translators, considering how different the languages are. What I could find about it online, unfortunately I don't speak Japanese, was that they tried to capture the archaic style of Tolkien, but they had to get creative in many places. For example, there are no articles in Japanese, so translating the Shire requires already a different approach, or writing specific words in capital letters, which do not exist in Japanese, like in the sentence, Smeagol will swear never to let him have it. Him in capital letters. So the translators had to find other ways of expressing that. I will link you a blog article that explains this a bit in the description. Some ideas and concepts might also be almost untranslatable, like the relationship of things written in modern English and others written in Old English or even Gothic. However, back to where we were. So how did those terms and parallels end up in Japanese media? The answer is a little bit surprising, while not being surprising at all if you think about it. As said, Tolkien had a huge impact in how we think about modern fantasy, especially high fantasy, in the West. And the West developed media that was inspired by Tolkien, but was also on its own very influential. The tabletop RPG Dungeons & Dragons, first published 1974, a year after Tolkien's death, is a very good example for that. For example, demons, today known as Balors, were called Balrogs originally as well. There were also Ents, now Treants, and hobbits, now called halflings. It seems the influence of Tolkien on Dungeons & Dragons was a bit controversial in the past, but if you search for it in D&D, you will definitely find it. In this context, Record of LotR's War was in its origins a D&D campaign from the mid-80s. This also explains how a lot of Tolkien ideas suddenly moved to Record of LotR's War. However, D&D is not the only example. There's also a very influential Western video game that had a huge impact on game development, Wizardry from 1981 and its successors. For example, in Wizardry 2, The Knight of Diamonds from 1982, you can find a Mithril key. In the first Wizardry, one of the starting classes is the Hobbit. Interestingly, those games also had ports for the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System. And Wizardry was popular in Japan and influenced many game developers. The term Balrog for a demon could have moved to Japan over Dungeons & Dragons. However, there is another game that used this term. The first Ultima, called Ultima 1, The First Age of Darkness, from 1981, has the term Balron for demons. According to a trivia entry in an Ultima wiki, we can learn that in the manual for the Nintendo port of Ultima 4, they are called Balrogs. Also, one of the races in the game is called Bobbits, and you guessed it, they are similar to hobbits. I assume these name changes also happened due to fears of rights violations. And the predecessor of Ultima 1 is called Akallabeth, World of Doom, from 1980, and here the Balrons are still called Balrogs. Also, the use of the term First Age is noticeable. Even the title, Akallabeth, is the name of the story about Numenor's downfall in Tolkien's Silmarillion. Aragorn's ancestors are from there. For example, Elendil and Isildur were born on Numenor, and Elrond's twin brother Elros was the first king of this legendary kingdom of the Dúnedain, the Men of the West. Some of those games were played by those who would later become game developers in Japan, influencing them. And as a result, these terms became a part of Japanese gaming culture for certain things to this day, if the right situation does not force name changes. Mithril is always a rare and precious metal, often silver. A Balrog is a demon. The dwarves are master blacksmiths living in iron kingdoms, which they are to some extent also in Norse mythology. There are halflings, elves, wizards, and noble knights of men. Timelines are divided into ages, and so on. And then some developers must have also dived deeper into Tolkien's writings itself. For example, in Castlevania Symphony of the Night from 1997, we find the legendary bloodthirsty sword Gurthang, the Iron of Death, which was the baleful sword of Turin Turambar, who was also called Mormigil when he wielded this sword, which translates to black sword, because Gurthang was black. Mormigil is also a sword in Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Actually, a ton of names from the Silmarillion appear in that game. Azachal, Walks, Malbong Sword, Fists of Tulkas, Orcrist, and so on. There must have been a Tolkien fan among the developers for sure. In a way, it's very human. Tolkien himself was also inspired by mythology and other early works. Most dwarf names from The Hobbit and also the name Gandalf was borrowed from the Poetic Edda that was written in parts about 800 to 1000 years ago. And I guess no wonder some of Tolkien's own terms became popular, because he created some pretty cool names. Everybody loves saying it was a Balrog of Morgoth. Mithril is also a very cool sounding word. I find it fascinating that these terms wandered so far. Tolkien inspired generations, and these inspirations resulted in new media with some references to their original inspirations. Tolkien was for sure not the only one. And those new works inspired again other generations who picked up those terms, sometimes even in places Tolkien reached far less with his books himself. And now I'm here trying to follow the steps back to Tolkien. And that's how Tolkien came to Japan. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this shorter video with quite an unusual topic. Do you know of other examples? If so, let me know in the comments. Also feel free to press the like button and maybe subscribe to my channel and check out my other content. If you are into video games, I also have a games related channel. Also, a huge shout out and thank you to all my supporters, be it on Patreon, Ko-fi or via channel memberships, Twitch subscriptions and so on. Much appreciated. Again, thank you for watching and goodbye.